Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Grim and Guilty.
On February 1st, 2012, 18-year-old Samantha Koenig was working the closing shift at a small coffee stand in Anchorage, Alaska. It seemed like a normal winter night. Customers came through the drive-through window, orders were taken, and the shift was nearly over. But sometimes just before closing, a man approached the kiosk. Within minutes, Samantha was gone. Her disappearance would eventually lead investigators to one of the most organized and methodical serial offenders in the United States. This is the story of Samantha Koenig and how her case led to the capture of serial killer Israel Keys. Samantha Koenig was born in 1993 and grew up in Alaska. Friends and family described her as independent, creative, and strong-willed. At the time of her disappearance, she was 18 years old and working at a small drive-through coffee stand called the Common Grounds in Anchorage. Coffee kiosks like this are common across Alaska. They are typically small buildings where one employee works alone, serving customers through a drive-through window. On the night of February 1st, Samantha was scheduled to close the stand. Her boyfriend planned to pick her up after her shift ended. But when he arrived, something immediately seemed wrong. The lights inside the stand were off, the window was closed, and Samantha was nowhere to be found. Inside the kiosk were her phone, her jacket, and other personal belongings. Police were contacted shortly after. At first, investigators weren't sure what had happened, but surveillance cameras would soon provide answers. The security footage from the coffee stand captured the final moments before Samantha disappeared. Shortly before closing, a man approached the service window. That man was later identified as Israel Keys. In the video, Samantha can be seen calmly handing over money from the cash register. Investigators believe Keys showed her a handgun and demanded the money. After she handed over the cash, he forced her to leave the kiosk and walk with him to his vehicle. The footage does not show a struggle. Investigators believe Samantha cooperated because she believed it might help her survive. Keys then drove her away from the coffee stand. At that point, she had effectively vanished. After abducting Samantha, Keys drove her to a shed on property he owned outside of Anchorage. During later FBI interviews, Keys admitted that he sexually assaulted Samantha and killed her within hours of her abduction. But the crime did not end there. Keys had already planned his next move. Shortly after the murder, he left Alaska and traveled with his girlfriend and young daughter on a cruise. Before leaving, however, he returned to the shed and staged something investigators would later describe as deeply disturbing. A few weeks after Samantha disappeared, her family received a ransom demand. The message demanded $30,000 in exchange for her safe return. Attached to the demand was a photograph. In the image, Samantha appeared to be sitting on the floor holding a newspaper dated after her disappearance. The photo seemed to prove she was still alive. Investigators later discovered the truth. Samantha had already been dead for weeks when the photograph was taken. Keys had applied makeup, posed her body, and staged the image to make it appear as though she was alive. Despite law enforcement involvement, the ransom instructions were followed. $30,000 was transferred as demanded. Soon after, withdrawals began appearing across the United States. Instead of withdrawing the ransom money in one place, Keys drove across multiple states making small withdrawals from ATMs. The transactions occurred in places like Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. By spreading withdrawals across different states, Keys may have been trying to confuse investigators and slow down the process of identifying the suspect. However, ATM cameras captured images of the man using Samantha's debit card. Those images would become critical to the investigation. Eventually, authorities traced the activity to a vehicle traveling through Texas. On March 13, 2012, Police in Lufkin, Texas, conducted a traffic stop on a vehicle connected to the ATM withdrawals. The driver was Israel Keys. Inside the vehicle, officers found items belonging to Samantha Koenig, including her debit card and cell phone. Keys was immediately taken into custody. Once investigators began questioning him, the scope of the case started to grow. What first appeared to be a kidnapping and murder would soon reveal something much larger. During interviews with the FBI, Keys eventually confessed to killing Samantha Koenig, but he also admitted to other murders. According to investigators, Keys claimed that he had been committing crimes for more than a decade. One of the most significant confessions involved a married couple from Vermont. Bill Courier and Lorraine Courier disappeared from their home in 2011. Keys told investigators he broke into their home late at night, kidnapped them, and later killed them. Their bodies have never been recovered. Keys also described a strategy that made his crimes especially difficult for investigators to detect. He called them kill kits. According to Keys, he buried buckets containing weapons and tools in remote locations across the country. These kits reportedly included items like guns, zip ties, cash, and other supplies. Some of them were buried years before he actually committed crimes in those areas. This meant he could travel to a location, retrieve the hidden kit, commit a crime, and leave without carrying suspicious items during travel. Investigators later recovered some of these buried kits in locations including New York. The existence of these kits suggested a level of long term planning rarely seen in serial offenders. Keys also took steps to avoid patterns. He often chose victims in locations far from where he lived. He traveled long distances before committing crimes, and he avoided targeting people he knew. Investigators believe these strategies allowed him to operate for years without being identified. Ironically, Samantha Koenig's murder may have been the moment he broke his own rules. Unlike previous victims, she lived in the same city where Keys lived. That decision ultimately helped investigators connect the evidence back to him. In April 2012, investigators recovered Samantha Koenig's remains from Matanuska Lake in Alaska. Keys had dismembered her body and placed the remains in a frozen lake. The discovery confirmed what investigators had feared since a ransom photograph was discovered. For Samantha's family, it provided painful closure, but also answers. Israel Keys remained in federal custody until investigators continued interviewing him about other potential victims. Authorities believed he may have been responsible for several additional murders across the United States. However, on December 2nd, 2012, Keys was found dead in his jail cell in Anchorage. He had died by suicide before his trial could begin. Because of this, many details about his crimes remain unknown. Investigators believe there may still be unidentified victims connected to him. Although Israel Keys confessed to several murders, the total number of victims is still unclear. The FBI continues to review unsolved cases that match his travel history. Cold case investigators have revisited missing person reports across multiple states looking for possible connections. More than a decade later, Samantha Koenig's case is still considered the turning point that exposed Keys. Her disappearance led to the investigation that ultimately stopped him. Samantha Koenig was 18 years old. She was finishing a normal work shift at a small coffee stand. Within hours, her life was taken by someone who had been committing crimes across the country for years. Her case exposed a killer who might have continued operating much longer if he had not made a mistake that night. And although many questions remain about the full scope of his crimes, Samantha's story is one that brought his crimes into the light. This has been Grim and Guilty, where the questions don't end, even if the episode does.